6 years ago, my husband passed away just after I had celebrated my 62nd birthday. I was still in good health at the time. Every day, a few of my old friends would invite me to go for walks, join in some square dancing, or take part in the community's flower arranging or exercise classes. I honestly thought the second half of my life would be peaceful and free. But not long after, my daughter-in-law Sophie got pregnant. With the baby due soon, she needed help, and as her mother-in-law, I couldn't just sit back. So, I packed up my things and moved from a small town in Oregon to San Francisco, where I lived with them in a tiny rented apartment, 2 bedrooms and a living room, though the entire place was smaller than the kitchen of my old house. They said the move was temporary and convinced me to sell my 2 properties. Added to the savings I had accumulated over the years, we had nearly $300,000. They also contributed the proceeds from selling the original apartment, and together we bought a house just over 1,000 square feet. The baby was born, a big boy at first, followed by a little girl. Over the next few years, I spent all my time in the kitchen. I prepared breakfast in the mornings and rocked the babies to sleep at night. I did this for 6 years straight. Finally, when the kids were old enough for school, I had a brief moment to catch my breath. But I wasn't the same as before. Age had caught up with me and my body was falling apart. My knees hurt, my back ached, and I was moving slower than I used to. Sophie's disdain was more and more obvious. She'd snap at me, always critical and difficult to please. I thought about leaving, but I had given them all my property and savings. Where could I possibly go? I didn't dare complain to my son, David. He always acted like he didn't hear me. When Sophie and I were at odds, he said nothing. If I criticized her, he defended her, calling me overly sensitive and paranoid. I stopped speaking up, afraid that if I made a fuss, it would only push them further away. In San Francisco, I didn't have any friends, and with nothing to do, I started playing the lottery. At first, it was just for comfort, but one day I actually hit the jackpot. $5 million. My hands were shaking as I double-checked the numbers 3 times before I could believe it. I immediately wanted to run into the living room to tell David, but then I paused. Maybe it would be better to surprise him later, after I made a big dinner to celebrate. As I was carrying bags of groceries back from the store, I missed a step and fell down the stairs, my head hitting the concrete. I passed out right there. When I woke up, my head was pounding and I vaguely heard the doctor's voice. Mild concussion, possible temporary memory loss. I opened my eyes with great effort and saw David sitting by my bedside. Suddenly, an idea crossed my mind. I wanted to see just how much he cared about me. Rubbing my head, I whispered, "Who are you?" He froze. I saw the panic in his face, clear as day. He turned to look at Sophie, who was standing off to the side, and they quietly left the room together. I strained my ears to listen to their whispered conversation in the hall. Sophie's voice was low. "What should we do? Is she really losing her memory? Should we send her away soon? My parents have been asking us to move them in for ages." David was silent for a moment before responding coldly, "Let's stick to the plan. Just send her to that cheap mental institution. I hear once you're in, you don't come out." Hearing their conversation felt like being plunged into ice-cold water. I had thought we would all sit around the dinner table tonight, laughing as I shared the good news about my win, but they had already planned to send me to a mental hospital. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was premeditated. Soon, David came back into the room wearing a fake smile. His voice was deliberately low, as though reading from a script. "Good afternoon, ma'am. We're from the Community Services Department. For individuals like you living alone, we have an emergency placement program. We've already arranged accommodation for you, and a car will pick you up this afternoon to take you to Sunnyvale Haven Retirement Home." "Ma'am." I nearly scoffed. When did I stop being his mother and become just a lonely senior? I had given everything for them, and now I was just a community placement. Was this what a son did? Was I wrong to raise him? But he didn't know I had $5 million now. I should thank that fall. It showed me their true faces earlier than I had ever expected. I squinted my eyes, pretending to be dazed, and dryly asked, "Where am I? What happened?" Sophie immediately took over, her tone unusually gentle, even laced with a bit of concern. "Ma'am, you've been living alone and you suddenly fainted today. The community service team brought you to the hospital. The doctor said you can't live alone anymore, so we've arranged everything. This afternoon we'll accompany you and all expenses will be covered." She patted my hand as she spoke, as if soothing a fragile elderly stranger. It was the first time in all these years she had spoken to me so kindly. When I heard her say, "All expenses covered," I couldn't help but laugh bitterly inside. My pension card was in their hands. My $2,500 monthly retirement income had now become their community benefit. If they wanted to act, I would play along. I nodded. Really? Well, thank you so much. You're such kind people. David and Sophie exchanged a glance, their faces full of smug satisfaction as if they had just secured the deal. They patted my shoulder and told me to rest, promising they would come to pick me up in the afternoon. As they hurriedly left the room, I could almost hear the ticking of their plans in their heads. They were probably going to the nursing home to finalize the arrangements. Too bad they didn't know. I was no longer the helpless old woman they could push around. As soon as they were out of sight, I immediately called the nurse and arranged my discharge. I took a cab back home that same night. While they were away, I quickly packed my documents and a few changes of clothes into a suitcase and left the house. When I reached the building entrance, 2 security guards approached me. A younger man recognized me and called out in surprise, "Miss Helen? You're out already? I was planning to visit you at the hospital today." His name was Jason, a local boy from our hometown. He was a good kid. When the kitchen faucet had broken, he was the one who came to fix it himself. The older security guard beside him chuckled. Yeah, it was Jason who called 911 first. If he hadn't acted quickly, things could have turned out badly. I smiled and nodded at Jason. Thank you, kid. I really appreciate it. He shyly scratched his head. No problem. It's the least I could do. But, are you going somewhere with those 2 suitcases? Planning to travel right after being discharged. I glanced around, avoiding a direct answer, and casually said, "Yeah, just going to clear my mind." Without another word, Jason stepped forward and took both of my heavy suitcases, one in each hand. "Miss Helen, where are you heading? Let me call a cab for you." Where to? A wave of emptiness washed over me. In all of San Francisco, I couldn't find a place where I could settle in peace. Return to my hometown? There was no place left for me there. Besides, if old friends saw me kicked out by my son, I could only imagine the gossip behind my back. Never mind, I'll find somewhere to stay for now, then figure things out. I looked around and suddenly noticed a grand building to the left of the apartment. Pacific Grand Hotel, a 5-star place. I pointed at it. "I'll stay there." Jason looked up, startled. "That's a luxury hotel, Helen. Are you sure?" I responded firmly, "Yes, I want to stay there." Jason hesitated for a moment but didn't ask further. He dragged my suitcases to the hotel and stayed with me to check in, staying with me until we reached the elevator before finally breathing a sigh of relief. All the way, Jason kept murmuring, "Helen, did you have a fight with your son? You should talk it through, he's your son. He must be worried about you. You leaving like this, your family will be so concerned." I didn't respond, keeping my head down. When he said worried, all I could picture was David outside the hospital saying, "Send her to the asylum." He couldn't wait for me to disappear as quickly as possible. My eyes welled up. The son I had raised with all my strength. He was less concerned about me than a young security guard's few words of care. After Jason helped me settle in the room and was about to leave, my tears wouldn't stop. "Jason, thank you," I choked out. "If only I had a son like you, how lucky my life would have been." He flustered, "Please don't say that. I believe David will come looking for you." I shook my head, then suddenly remembered something important. "Jason, don't tell them I'm here. Let them think I'm still in the hospital. Or better yet, let them keep thinking I've lost my memory. Honestly, I wish I could forget them completely." He didn't say anything else, only gently reminded me, "You must take care of yourself," before quietly leaving the room. I wiped away my tears with a tissue, my gaze sweeping over the tall floor-to-ceiling windows, the soft, plush bed, the quietly running air conditioner. Finally, I didn't have to follow anyone's orders or act as anyone's free caretaker. Thinking about the lottery winnings that would soon be deposited into my bank account, I started to calm down. All the grievances and pain I'd endured were finally about to pay off. I didn't want to wallow in sadness any longer. That night, I changed into fresh clothes and headed down to the buffet on the 2nd floor of the hotel. King crab, lobster, steak, truffle soup, red wine. Dishes I used to only gaze at on the menu but never dared to order, now all mine to choose from. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. With every mouthful, it felt like I was confirming something. I was no longer the old woman who sacrificed everything for her family, whose name could be erased without a second thought. After returning to my room, I took a long, hot bath, then rested against the soft cushions, watching the night view of San Francisco through the window. Finally, I felt the tension leave my body. If they knew that the lottery ticket that should have been theirs was now in my hands, would they be grinding their teeth? Just thinking about it made me burst out laughing. As I lay on the bed, soft as clouds, my mind still painting a picture of my future prosperous life, a sudden phone ring broke my daydream. I picked up the phone, seeing a strange local number on the screen, and a sense of caution immediately washed over me. Since moving to San Francisco, I had hardly built any social connections. Between taking care of the kids and doing housework, I never had the time to meet new people. Who could this be? I pressed the answer button, and a voice on the other end was unnervingly sweet, almost overly so. "Hello, may I speak to Ms. Helen? This is Fiona Fowler, the director of Sunnyvale Haven Psychiatric Facility. We arranged for staff to pick you up from the hospital this afternoon, but we found out you discharged yourself early. Are you all right? Could you please tell us your location? We can send a car to pick you up." I nearly laughed out loud, though it was a laugh tinged with cold bitterness. So those two animals were afraid I'd recover my memory too quickly. They had the asylum staff sent directly to the hospital to pick me up. When they couldn't find me, they immediately handed out my phone number, terrified of missing out on their successful plan to send Mom away. David was truly a bastard. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Thank you very much, Director Fiona. I've regained my senses and have made new life arrangements. I'm not considering staying in a psychiatric facility at this time." There was a pause on the other end, but her voice remained polite. "I see. However, your son has already paid for 3 months of your accommodation in advance. Our monthly fee is $3,000, so a total of $9,000 has been paid." I immediately interrupted her. "No need, just consider it a personal donation to your facility. Don't contact him again, I'm fine, and there's no need for you to worry about me." There was a brief silence on the other end, then she responded in a tone of surprise. "Thank you so much, Ms. Helen. We truly appreciate your support for the psychiatric facility, and you're always welcome to visit us here." After hanging up, I stared at the screen, still holding the phone, but my emotions were all over the place. My son, truly cornered, didn't even care to ask where I was. He handed over my contact information to someone else, as if dealing with a parcel or an unwanted piece of furniture. And now, I had become the generous donor, in the gentle director's words. Is it ironic? Very much so. I sighed, but there was no time to dwell on it. The next morning, I went to the state lottery center as planned. When the winnings hit my account, the numbers on my bank statement glowed like a beacon, lighting up the years of frustration that had weighed me down. After taxes for $1 million, legitimately mine. I checked it 3 times and even pinched myself secretly. This wasn't a dream, this wasn't an illusion. I, Helen, had for the first time in my life truly gained control over my own fate. The first thing I did when I got back to the hotel was report my pension card as lost. The $2,500 monthly retirement check had been tightly controlled by them for years. But now it was over. From now on, they wouldn't be able to pull a single penny from my pockets. With the card lost, I felt a huge weight lift off me. It was like finally severing the chain that had been choking me for years. I decided to go back to the hotel and get some rest. As I walked by the old apartment building, I suddenly thought of Jason, the young security guard who helped me call 911 when I fell and carried my luggage. He had been so busy running around, I hadn't even had a chance to thank him properly. I turned and went to a nearby grocery store, bought a big bag of fruit and 2 bouquets of flowers, and made my way straight to the security office. Jason greeted me warmly, inquiring about my health, but then noticed the things I was carrying. "Helen, what's all this for?" I smiled and pushed the fruit and flowers toward him. "These are for you as a thank you from me." He quickly waved his hands. "No need, I just did what I should have, really. No need to worry about it." I pulled a thick envelope from my bag containing $2,000. "And it's just a little token of my appreciation. You really helped me out that day." Jason jumped back in surprise, shaking his head. No, I really can't accept this. I just did what I had to do." I forced the envelope into his hands and he tried to push it back as if we were playing tug-of-war over a hot potato. At that moment, the older security guard, Mike, chimed in with a smile. "Jason, just take it. Doesn't your wife just move here to San Francisco? She hasn't found a job yet, right? You could arrange a place for her to stay. Don't keep squeezing into this little office. I froze and turned to look at Jason. Your wife is here. He awkwardly nodded. Yeah, she's still looking for a job, so she's been staying in the security office for now. I slapped my thigh. What is this? Jason, have your wife come stay with me at the hotel tonight. I booked a double room and there's a bed no one's using. Jason's face flushed red instantly. That might be too much trouble for you. I waved it off. No trouble at all. I'm lonely staying by myself anyway, and she can help me with some things. He paused and asked, what things do you need help with? I narrowed my eyes and flashed him a smile. Buying a house. With that, I shoved the envelope into his arms and walked out of the security office without looking back. That evening, Jason indeed brought his wife Anna to my hotel room. She was a gentle and grounded young woman with a round face, a full figure and eyes that held a calming serenity. We were both from small-town backgrounds, so our conversation felt familiar and comfortable. Anna shared her story with me. Her family had opposed her marrying Jason from the start, simply because he was a security guard with an unstable income and no background. They even pressured her to marry a man in his 50s, a second-time groom with a limp. Anna refused to accept her fate. She and Jason secretly registered their marriage, then quietly left their hometown. She had originally found a temporary caregiving job in another city in California, but missed Jason so much that she eventually quit and followed him to San Francisco. But reality was harsh. She had been job hunting for 3 days, going to interviews every day, but the companies either had long unpaid trial periods or didn't offer any health benefits. They didn't even have a stable place to stay, and were sleeping on the floor of the security office. As she spoke, her voice trailed off and she looked up at me shyly. Helen, we're rushing to find a place. Once we find something suitable, I'll move out so I don't trouble you. I smiled, patting her hand. Don't worry. Actually, I've been looking at some places. Why don't you come with me? It'll be nice to have someone to chat with. Her eyes brightened and she smiled brightly. Of course, I'd love to come with you. Jason also chimed in. Yeah, it feels safer looking at places with someone else. But, if David finds out, do you think he'll? Before he could finish, I cut him off sharply. Don't ever mention that person to me again. From today on, I no longer recognize him as my son. And you don't need to tell him anything about me. Jason paused, a bit confused but nodded nonetheless. The next morning, I set out with Anna to visit real estate agents and property projects. We spent the next 2 days touring properties, and on the third day at a high-rise development in downtown called Harbor Place, I immediately fell for one of the fully furnished apartments. At 1,300 square feet, it had an open layout, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Golden Gate Bay, and a kitchen equipped with high-end German appliances I had only seen in magazines. The total price was just under $1.3 million, move-in ready. Without hesitation, I paid the full price with my card. The real estate agent was left speechless. Once the paperwork was done, I took Anna into our new home. She carefully took off her shoes at the entrance, looking quite cautious. I gave her a quick tour of the apartment and then pointed to the second bedroom with a balcony. This one's for you and Jason. The sunlight here is perfect. She froze, her eyes wide. What? We're staying here? This is too much. Jason immediately shook his head. No, Helen, this isn't acceptable. It's too much of a burden on you. I sighed. Don't say that. I'd actually be happy if you stayed. Feels so empty living alone in such a big place. If you feel uncomfortable, just help out with the chores. It'll make everything easier for all of us. The young couple exchanged a glance and finally, Anna blushed and nodded. Okay, I'll take care of all the housework here from now on. I chuckled. Now that's more like it. I've worked hard my whole life and now I finally get to enjoy the good life. We all laughed and suddenly the room felt alive with warmth. Anna is really hardworking. In the first few days after we moved into our new home, she buzzed around like a whirlwind, kitchen, bathroom, floors, windowsills. She even scrubbed the balcony until it was spotless and placed a few small plants in the sunniest corner. The house immediately came alive with a new energy. She's also an excellent cook. The flavors of her dishes instantly reminded me of my childhood home. She and I were both from that forgotten little town in the Midwest. The cornbread she made, the chicken soup, she added the spices just right, cooked to perfection just like my mom had taught me by the stove all those years ago. At night, I often saw her and Jason busy in the kitchen, bickering back and forth, and when the food was finally on the table, they'd both fight to serve me. In that moment I really felt like home was back. It was that feeling of being cared for, of having people gather around the table. Not being a maid, not being the old lady who's constantly criticized, but simply being Helen, someone who mattered. Sometimes I'd ask them, "What are your plans for the future?" Jason said he was an orphan and there was no one waiting for him back in his hometown. He and Anna just wanted to settle down in San Francisco. Even if life was tough, they wanted to carve out their own future. Anna nodded, adding that she was an abandoned child, never wanting to return to that place again. She just wanted to live with Jason, to stand on their own 2 feet without owing anyone anything. Except. Jason sighed softly. "Right now my job isn't enough to keep us steady in this city. When will we finally be able to live the life we want?" Anna looked at him with a particularly determined expression. "Jason, as long as we stick together, I believe we'll make it through." She paused for a moment, then suddenly broke into a smile. "By the way, I have some good news." Both Jason and I looked up at her. "I got a job," she said, adding a piece of roasted chicken to my plate. "Really?" I asked, delighted. "Yes, I've been hired by a hospital called Sunnyvale Haven. My hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week, and the salary is $3,000 a month." She hesitated, looking a bit embarrassed. "Helen, I might not be able to make you breakfast every day anymore. But I'll still be home in time to cook dinner." I laughed out loud. "Silly girl, I'm not at the stage where I need someone to take care of me. Go ahead and work, don't worry about me, I can handle myself." She sighed in relief, her smile returning. "This is just the beginning. But I'm sure things will keep getting better for us, right, Jason?" "Of course." We both said in unison. She suddenly remembered something, her eyes lighting up. "And our director, Fiona Fowler, she's really kind, speaks gently and with tact. She really seems trustworthy." I smiled and nodded, though I didn't speak. Fiona Fowler and I had already spoken on the phone long ago. Time passed quickly. A week went by, and my greedy son finally realized something was wrong because I had started taking action. When David and Sophie returned to the apartment from the hospital, I could imagine how light and happy they must have felt. They probably thought I, the old woman, had been successfully sent to the psychiatric hospital, and that the massive lottery winnings were ripe for the picking, just waiting for them to claim. They'd probably already started dreaming of their future lavish life, buying a luxury car, traveling the world, and showing up all the people who had once looked down on them. However, their smug satisfaction didn't last long. On the 3rd day, when David received the call from the psychiatric hospital, his smile must have instantly frozen. On the other end, Fiona Fowler's voice was polite but tinged with confusion. "Hello, is this Mr. David? This is Fiona Fowler from Sunnyvale Haven. Yesterday, as agreed, we sent a car to the hospital to pick up your mother. But the hospital informed us that she had already discharged herself early. Do you know where she is now? We've received your prepayment, but we haven't seen Ms. Helen check in yet." David's mind went completely blank. He stiffly placed the phone down, looking at Sophie, who was eagerly flipping through a travel brochure on the sofa, her face full of hopeful anticipation, completely oblivious to the rising tension in the air. She's not in the psychiatric hospital." David's voice must have quivered slightly. Sophie looked up in confusion. "Helen? How could that be? Didn't they go to pick her up? The director said she discharged herself early." David suddenly jumped to his feet, his tone filled with disbelief and panic. "She didn't go there." I can imagine them exchanging bewildered glances, their faces showing growing suspicion. "I discharged myself early? What did that mean?" They must have tried calling my phone, only to get a disconnected message. David probably pulled out my pension card, trying to check the balance at an ATM, only to find that the card had been reported as lost. One abnormality after another cast a heavy shadow over their hearts. Could it be? Could she have regained her memory? Sophie's voice must have turned sharp, laced with fear. Has she remembered everything? David's face must have gone pale as he recalled my words in the hospital. "Who are you?" At the time he had thought it was a symptom of memory loss, but now it seemed more like I had been testing them. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. A chill surely crawled up his spine. If I had regained my memory, then their whole plan was ruined. And they couldn't access my pension anymore. That's impossible. Didn't the doctor say her concussion would be accompanied by temporary memory loss? David must have mumbled to himself, trying to convince himself, but the cold sweat on his forehead betrayed his inner turmoil. The next few days must have been a nightmare for David and Sophie. They sent people to the park and community centers I frequented but found nothing. It was as if I had vanished from the world, no trace, no message. Their growing panic escalated with each passing day. Then a letter from a law firm arrived at their home. David opened the envelope, and when he saw the words Ms. Helen on the letterhead, along with the demand for the return of the $300,000 I had made from selling my property and all my savings, his mind must have gone blank. What? She bought a house. Sophie screamed upon reading the contents of the letter, her voice piercing the air like a sharp needle. The letter clearly stated that Ms. Helen had purchased a fully furnished high-rise apartment at the Harbor Place project in the city center with a full payment. It also mentioned reliable information indicating that she was now living with a young couple named Jason and Anna. This news was like a bolt from the blue, completely breaking down David and Sophie's mental defenses. They never imagined that not only had I regained my memory, but in such a short time, I had amassed wealth far beyond their expectations. The mysterious source of those funds and my swift, bold home purchase made them terrified, as they realized they could no longer control me. She's gone mad. She must be out of her mind. Sophie screamed hysterically, her hand shaking as she pointed at the letter, her eyes filled with shock and jealousy. She couldn't accept that an old woman whom they had treated like a doormat had flipped the tables overnight, possessing wealth and status far beyond their wildest imaginations. David's face turned ashen, the lawyer's letter slipping from his hands to the floor. He felt as though his entire body had turned cold, as if he had fallen into an endless abyss. He had once thought he controlled his mother's wealth, paving the way for his future life, only to realize that everything had turned to dust. My sudden retaliation had shattered all of their plans. Meanwhile, I sat in the living room of my newly purchased apartment, sunlight streaming through the large floor-to-ceiling windows, warming me as I held a cup of tea that Anna had made. I looked at the copy of the lawyer's letter in my hands, a cold smile tugging at the corner of my lips. I knew that letter had already reached David and Sophie's hands. They must be on edge right now, their nerves fraying as they paced in anxiety. My lawyer, Michael Brown, is a senior attorney at a prestigious law firm in San Francisco. He is a highly experienced professional with a meticulous approach. When we first met after hearing my story, he showed great sympathy and professionalism. Miss Helen, your situation is indeed heartbreaking. But from a legal standpoint, you are fully entitled to reclaim the property that belongs to you, Michael said with a firm tone. The $300,000 from the sale of your property as well as your personal savings, if transferred to them while you were either mentally incapacitated or under duress, provide us with enough grounds to file a lawsuit. The key here is gathering more evidence to prove that David and Sophie's actions were malicious appropriation. I detailed my 6 years of living with David and Sophie, explaining how they gradually took control of my finances, and how they had even planned to send me to a psychiatric facility while I was in the hospital. Michael listened attentively, taking notes as I spoke. We'll need your bank statements to prove the transfer of funds and to show that you were the one who funded the property purchase. More importantly, we need evidence of David and Sophie's malicious actions, Michael continued. You mentioned that they secretly discussed sending you to the psychiatric hospital. These are crucial leads. If we can find the medical staff who were present at the time or locate any written records, it would significantly strengthen our case. I nodded, already formulating a preliminary plan in my mind. I knew Anna's involvement might become my strongest piece of evidence. Over the next few days, David and Sophie's calls came relentlessly, like the tolling of a death knell. Initially, they tested the waters with feigned concern, but it soon escalated to anger and threats. They took turns trying to manipulate me with guilt, emotional blackmail, and moral condemnation. Mom, how could you do this? I'm your son. David roared into the phone, attempting to guilt-trip me. Helen, think about it, you're getting older. All this fighting can't be good for your health. Sophie's voice sounded so pitiful, as if she were genuinely concerned for me. But I was no longer that helpless old woman they could control. I picked up my phone and added all of David and Sophie's new numbers to my block list. Whenever they called from an unknown number, I would answer coldly, responding in a tone as indifferent as the wind blowing through fallen leaves. "You're my son? Didn't you call me a community placement? Didn't you plan to send me to the asylum?" My voice was calm and unshaken with an air of undeniable coolness. "Now I'm just living according to your plans. You once treated me like unnecessary furniture, so now I no longer need you." Without hesitation, I hung up the phone. I wanted them to truly feel that I had completely broken free from their control. This cold indifference would hurt them far more than any harsh words. Meanwhile, Anna was progressing exceptionally well at the hospital. She was hardworking, patient, and thorough with the patients, quickly earning the respect of Director Fiona and her colleagues. She worked from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 5 days a week, earning $3,000 a month. Although this was a new field for her, Anna adapted quickly and began to find both joy and a sense of accomplishment in her work. Every evening when she came home, Anna would share stories from her day, often complaining about some of the challenges she faced. I would listen attentively, occasionally offering some advice. Her encouragement and support gave me a sense of warmth and belonging I had never felt before. Jason continued working hard, not only as a security guard downstairs in our apartment building but also delivering takeout after his shifts, trying to create a better life for our little family. He was no longer as lost as he had been before. With my support and Anna's company, he was filled with hope for the future. Life in the new apartment gave me the warmth of a real family that I hadn't felt in years. Every morning I woke up to the smell of food wafting from the kitchen. Although Anna worked, whenever she was home she always made sure to prepare breakfast for me. At night we would sit around the table together eating the home-cooked meals Anna made, talking about the events of the day. The warmth and comfort in our home was something I had never experienced during the 6 years I had spent with David and Sophie. I was no longer the free caretaker always revolving around the kitchen. I was truly Helen, someone who was cared for and loved. Jason and Anna's care for me was genuine. They would check on my health, remind me to take my medicine, walk with me, watch TV together, and even help with the household chores as if they were my own children. Watching these kind-hearted young people, my heart swelled with gratitude. I knew I had made the right decision bringing them into my life. "Helen, you look so much better these days," Anna said one evening as she massaged my shoulders. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, ever since moving in with you two I've been feeling much better. With you here this place really feels like home." Jason chimed in from the side. "Helen, consider this your home. Think of us as your children. We'll take care of you." My eyes misted up as I gently patted Anna's hand, feeling deeply thankful. I knew that Jason and Anna had realized I was going through a family dispute. Although they hadn't directly asked too many details, I could feel their unwavering support and meticulous care. Their actions gave me an unprecedented strength. I knew that in this war with David and Sophie I was not alone. One day while I was discussing the case with Michael Brown, my lawyer, Anna happened to walk by with a cup of coffee. As I looked at her, an idea suddenly clicked in my mind. "Mr. Brown, I think I have an important witness who could be very helpful," I said. Mr. Brown looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Anna, do you remember when I told you that David had contacted Sunnyvale Haven, asking them to take me in?" I asked her. Anna nodded. "Yes, I remember, Helen. Director Fiona even mentioned it to me. She said David had prepaid for 3 months of accommodation and specifically requested the cheapest room. The director was really puzzled and said you were a kind person, even mentioning that you had donated money to the facility." Mr. Brown's eyes lit up. "This is very important. Miss Anna, as an employee of Sunnyvale Haven, can you confirm these details? If we could get a written statement from Director Fiona, that would be even better." Anna hesitated. "I'm just a regular staff member. I'm not sure if the director would be willing to testify for me." I looked at Anna and encouraged her. "Anna, this concerns my innocence and their malicious actions towards me. Director Fiona is an honest person and I believe she will understand. Besides, as an insider, your testimony would be even more convincing." Anna was eventually persuaded. She agreed to speak privately with Director Fiona to see if she could obtain a written statement or ask the director to testify on my behalf. Anna had worked closely with Fiona, who had been very satisfied with her performance at the hospital. Anna knew Fiona was a trustworthy and kind person, so she felt confident that Fiona would be willing to help. During her lunch break, Anna went to find Director Fiona, carefully explaining my situation and my request for a written statement regarding David's prepayment and his insistence on arranging the cheapest room. After listening, Fiona furrowed her brow. "Mr. David did make that call and paid for 3 months in advance," Fiona said after a brief pause. She looked at Anna with a serious expression. His tone was indeed strange, repeatedly stressing the need for the cheapest. And when Miss Helen called to say she wouldn't be staying and suggested that the payment be treated as a donation to our hospital, I was quite surprised. After all, which son would send his mother to a psychiatric hospital and treat the prepayment as a donation? Fiona fell silent for a moment, then looked at Anna, her tone becoming firm. "Anna, I know you have a close relationship with Ms. Helen. As a healthcare professional, my duty is to protect the rights of the patients. If Mr. David has indeed acted improperly towards Ms. Helen, I will not tolerate it." In the end, Fiona agreed to provide me with a written statement detailing the conversation with David. She also expressed that, if necessary, she would be willing to testify in court. Once I had Fiona's written statement in hand, a heavy weight lifted off my chest. I knew now without a doubt that I was going to win this case. With Michael Brown's help, I formally issued a lawyer's letter to David and Sophie, demanding the return of all the assets they had unlawfully taken, including the $300,000 from the sale of the property and my personal savings. I made it clear that if they refused, I would immediately initiate legal proceedings. Under Mr. Brown's guidance, a formal mediation meeting was arranged. David and Sophie attended with their lawyer, trying to minimize their losses under the guise of reconciliation. "Ms. Helen," David's lawyer began bluntly, "we believe that you entrusted Mr. David with the management of the property and savings out of trust, as part of your arrangements for your later years. Now you suddenly change your mind and are demanding a huge sum in compensation, which seems inconsistent with the facts," he continued. I looked at them coldly, a cynical smile tugging at my lips. I didn't speak, only motioned to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown placed documents on the table, my bank statements, clearly showing the flow of funds. He then presented the written statement from Fiona. "This is the written statement provided by Director Fiona Fowler of Sunnyvale Haven." Mr. Brown's voice was clear and authoritative. "It proves that Mr. David proactively contacted the facility and prepaid for 3 months of accommodation for Ms. Helen. At that time, Mr. David and Ms. Sophie were at the hospital when they learned of Ms. Helen's memory loss and subsequently devised their plan to send her to a psychiatric hospital." David and Sophie's faces turned ashen. They never expected that even Fiona would become my witness. This is slander," Sophie screamed, her voice shrill. "We were just concerned about her, afraid she'd have no one to care for her after losing her memory." "Concerned?" I finally spoke, my voice calm like a deep pool of water, but with an undeniable strength. "Is this still concern, when outside the hospital, you were talking about sending me to a place where you basically never come back?" The words hit like thunder, reverberating through the mediation room. David and Sophie froze instantly, their faces reflecting shock and disbelief. They thought I had lost my memory, believed their private conversation would never be heard by anyone else, let alone be spoken aloud by me. How could you know?" David's voice trembled, his eyes filled with terror. I pulled the winning lottery ticket from my bag and gently placed it on the table. The red numbers and clear markings gleamed under the light. "Because I never had amnesia," my voice was soft, but each word landed heavily, striking at David and Sophie's hearts. "I just wanted to see how deep your love could go when money is involved. Now I understand." David and Sophie stared at the lottery ticket, suddenly understanding everything. They completely crumbled. The $5 million ticket felt like a sharp blade, cutting through all their greed and hypocrisy. The mediation broke down completely and the case, as I had hoped, went to court. In court, I stood as the plaintiff and my lawyer, Mr. Brown, methodically presented the evidence. I testified calmly, recounting how I had been manipulated, deceived, and abandoned by my son and daughter-in-law. Next, Fiona and Anna took the stand as witnesses, exposing David and Sophie's malicious actions in full. David and Sophie's lawyer tried to defend them, claiming this was just a family dispute, and that David and Sophie only acted out of concern for their mother. But faced with the overwhelming evidence and testimonies, their defense crumbled. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The court ordered David and Sophie to return the full $300,000 they had unlawfully taken from me, along with all my savings, plus interest and compensation for emotional distress. When the judgment was handed down, David and Sophie's faces turned ashen. Not only had they lost my wealth, but they had also lost what little dignity they had left. I regained all the stolen property and my life was back on track, more prosperous and free than ever before. I didn't indulge in the pleasure of revenge but instead donated part of my lottery winnings to several senior welfare organizations and children's charities. I wanted my wealth to truly help those in need, to give back to society and bring warmth to those less fortunate. I bought Jason and Anna that small apartment as the starting point for their new life. Jason and Anna were overwhelmed with emotion, tears filling their eyes. They knew that I had truly accepted them as family, closer even than my own children. They moved into their new home, but every evening after work they would still return to my apartment. We three would share meals, chat, and bask in the warmth of family. My later years were rich and peaceful. I no longer needed to sacrifice for anyone, nor did I have to watch my every move. I lived a life that truly belonged to me. Every morning I would stand on the balcony, admiring the magnificent view of the Golden Gate Bay, feeling the freedom of the sea breeze against my face. I no longer worried about making a living. Instead, I could arrange my time as I pleased. I would take walks in the park, attend community flower arranging classes, and even signed up for a painting course at the senior university. I reconnected with my old friends from Oregon and often invited them to visit San Francisco. They were amazed at how vibrant and youthful I looked and often asked how I stayed so energetic. I would laugh and share my story, but I would downplay the lottery part, focusing instead on how I had finally broken free and was living a life of freedom. My old friends looked at me with admiration and I had become the envy of them all, a shining example of what they aspired to. On countless nights I would lie on the soft sofa, gazing out at the dazzling San Francisco skyline, occasionally thinking of David and Sophie. But the pain and resentment from those past days had faded into the distance, becoming nothing more than a blur. I held no grudges, only a sense of relief. Because that unexpected fall had shown me the true nature of people, and it had given me a new lease on life. My life was no longer shackled by the past, but filled with endless possibilities. I realized that true happiness isn't about how much wealth you have, but about having genuine relationships and a free spirit. I, Helen, the old lady who had once been abandoned, had now become the woman I always wanted to be. My story had become a legend of courage, rebirth, and hope.